Yesterday, a child came out to wonder.
Welcome to Gracefully Graying. I am your host, family law attorney Henry Gornbein. I'm also a partner in the full-service Birmingham law firm of Lippitt O'Keefe Gornbein. My goal with this series is to explore issues that we all face as we gray and grow older. We'll be looking at issues from economic, psychological, legal, and emotional perspectives. Today on Gracefully Graying, I am pleased to welcome a good friend and a judge I have tremendous respect for, Oakland County Probate Judge, Chief Judge Pro Tem, Linda Hallmark. Judge Hallmark, welcome to Gracefully Graying.
Thank you, Henry. So nice of you to have me on the program.
Well, it's always a pleasure, and I really enjoy having you as a guest. First of all, why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about your background and how you became a judge? And I remember when you were a referee at the
That's
front of
right.
the court.
Well, I, of course, started my career in private practice, as most lawyers do. Then went to the Oakland County Friend of the Court, where I spent 17 years as a referee and had a lot of experience there hearing cases. And then in 1997, I was appointed by the governor to the probate court for Oakland County. So it was a great transition for me. I'd already been hearing cases. I was very interested in the judicial process and was fortunate enough to receive that appointment. So for the last 20 years, I have been a probate court judge, and I served many years both in probate and in the family division of our circuit court. So I had both hats on. Today, in the last year, I've just gone to an all probate docket.
You found that a difficult transition? Because, you know, your heart, I don't know if your heart, but for many, many years, your focus was on the family law.
Yeah, and I still love family law. You know, I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for that, and I hope to still be active in some of the organizations and educational opportunities with respect to family law. But you know, probate also has many opportunities to work with and to help families. I call it the other end of the spectrum. In family law, often we're dealing with parents and there are disputes regarding children. When we're looking at probate court issues, often we're talking about elders and family disputes related to them. So it's kind of like the whole spectrum coming together for me.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about what the probate court docket consists of and what areas you cover?
Well, just what you would think of. We handle decedents' estates, so after death, the passing of assets through a probate estate. We also handle trust matters if there's a contest of a trust. We handle guardianships and conservatorships, both for adults and for children. We also handle mental health issues. So if there are civil commitment proceedings, if there are proceedings regarding persons who are not guilty by reason of insanity, we handle all of those kinds of matters. So that's pretty much the traditional probate docket. Now it does vary from county to county. Each county has the ability to make a plan between the circuit and probate court for their county. So some of them are merged. As I said, for many years I heard family cases as well as probate cases, and in many counties that still is the system. So you have to sort of know where you are and what the process is in the county that you're working in.
Why don't we start with the probate docket, and this is estates of decedents. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how that works?
Right. Again, once someone dies, if you have assets that are solely in that person's name, they need to be passed on either to family members. If there's no family, you know, there's an escheat to the state, and you've probably heard about that process. So it's initiated by a petition to the court. Someone will come in and ask to be appointed the personal representative of the estate, which means they will garner the assets of the estate. They will handle any claims against the estate, even for things, for instance, like a funeral bill. So they'll pay any of the last expenses of the decedent. The court also is then asked to determine the heirs. So if there's a will, we're going to look at the will and determine who the heirs are under the will. If it passes without a will, then there's a statutory scheme for who takes the assets. And the court will also make that determination. Is there a will and should it be admitted to probate? So those are the kinds of things we look at initially when we receive a petition for probate.
How long does a typical estate take, assuming there are no complications?
Well, it's really all over the map. It depends on the size of the estate, the assets, the complexity of the assets. I mean, sometimes there are businesses involved and all kinds of more complicated matters. And then it also depends on whether or not we have contests within the case. So sometimes there's a contest about who should serve as the personal representative. There may be a contest over the assets. More than one person is claiming a particular asset. There could be contests about debts that were owed at the time of the person's death. So lots of things can complicate the process and make it take longer. But we try and wrap our cases up as quickly and efficiently as we can. The longer they linger, obviously, the more cost to the estate,
Right.
and more frustrating to the parties who are interested in the estate.
Now, I think one notion is that some people feel if you have a will, you avoid probate, and that's not true. The only way to avoid probate would be if everything's jointly held and it passes without probate.
Yeah, that's a possibility. If you have joint assets and there's a right of survivorship, it can pass outside of probate. If you have a trust, also, the trust allows you to avoid probate court and pass the assets to a trustee who will then administer them. And we get involved in trusts usually only when there's a dispute going on between the interested people.
What are typical disputes that you see in probate of estates?
Well, again, they can be all over the map. I mean, when you think about our society today, going back to my family law background, more than 50% of persons are divorced. So if there's a divorce, sometimes there's a first family and a second family, and sometimes those are areas of dispute. There can be a dispute with respect to who's best suited to serve as personal representative. Sometimes more than one person wants that role, and we have to make a decision about who is best suited in that particular circumstance. So there can be all kinds of issues flowing just within the family dynamic that complicates things.
I'm sure if there's a lot of money, that can complicate things too.
Money always complicates things, but I tell people that generally it's a good problem. If you're dividing money, that's usually a good problem to have. When there's no money and you're dividing debts, that's a bad problem to have.
That's true. Now, if someone's contesting a will, what are the reasons? I mean, I hear, undue influence or someone who's not competent to make a will. What are some of the issues you face?
Yeah, those
with
are
regard to that?
precisely some of the issues that we face. If someone, for instance, is at the end of life and has dementia, Alzheimer's, those kinds of issues, we need to ascertain that when the will was made, the person had the requisite capacity to be able to know who their heirs should be and what the estate consists of. So those are the kinds of issues we're going to look at. Sometimes it comes down to, did the person actually sign the will? We've had will contests where we have handwriting experts come in to say, yes, this is the person's signature, or no, it wasn't the person's signature. So that can even be an issue sometimes. And then, as I said, depending on what the assets are, if there are business interests, complicated real estate interests, those kinds of things, that can be a source of conflict between parties.
Now, I know you cannot disinherit a spouse, but you can disinherit children.
Yes.
That's correct?
Yes. The spouse has what we call a spousal election. So even if you decide that you don't want your wife to take your estate, she may come in and decide to exercise the spousal election. And at that point, she'll receive assets because we don't want to impoverish the spouse of the decedent.
Let's go into the next area, and that's maybe the toughest area. For me, it's an emotional issue, and that's your area where you're dealing with either mental health or people who are, no longer cognizant, either through Alzheimer's or dementia. And tell us how that works.
Well, the mental health cases we see, what we're looking at generally is should the person be involuntarily committed for treatment? And there's a statutory criteria that we're going to look at. Is the person a danger to themselves or others? Can the person meet their basic physical needs, provide things like food, clothing, shelter? Also, do they understand the nature of their illness, and are they willing to work with the doctors and the mental health professionals to manage their illness, whether that be by therapy, by taking medication, whatever it is. So if people are not managing their mental health issue well, we might get a petition that they be hospitalized so that they can get stabilized on medication and get the appropriate treatment out in the community. So that's one type of mental health proceeding. We also preside over cases that we call Kevin's Law, and the Kevin's Law is actually an assisted outpatient treatment program, so that we don't necessarily want to put everybody in a mental hospital. We have lots of community resources, and perhaps if the person is treated through those, they can remain out of the hospital, but we oversee that treatment to make sure the person is complying. So those are kind of the mental health areas. The other large portion of our probate docket has to do with conservatorships and guardianships. And when you mention things like dementia or Alzheimer's, once a person is legally incapacitated, they may need a guardian or conservator to step in. The guardian generally's responsibilities has to do with taking care of the person. So things like medical decisions, housing, all of those kinds of things are handled by a guardian. The conservator is a person who handles the estate. So financial issues, if the person's receiving a pension or has business assets or other property, the conservator would step in and oversee those things to protect the individual. And it's important because, once someone goes into care, if you're at a point where you can't be independent in your home any longer and you have to go into some kind of care, that can get very expensive. So we want to make sure that, first of all, the person's in the best situation they can be in, and secondly, that their assets are going to be sufficient to take care of them.
Can one person serve as both a conservator and a guardian?
Yeah, and often that is the case. Often, for instance, a spouse will serve in both capacities, sometimes a child. If the individual doesn't have an appropriate family member or a close friend who can act, we even have public guardians and conservators who can come in. Those are usually lawyers, and sometimes those are our real unsung heroes because they take cases where either there's no one who's appropriate to act or where there are very limited assets, and they'll come in sometimes even without charging a fee just to make sure that the person is cared for properly. So without those kinds of resources, we would really be in dire straits in our court.
Judge Hallmark, we've reached our first break point,
All
so
right.
we will be right back after this break with my guest, Oakland County Probate Judge Linda Hallmark.
As a business owner, you're always looking to save money and cut costs where you can. And if you advertise on radio or television, you know it can get pretty pricey. If radio and TV aren't delivering like they promised, and you're looking for a more reasonably priced way to get your message to the masses, I've got an answer for you. New Radio Media. With live streaming and on-demand programming, your message can be seen throughout the day, and you can worry a little less about cutting those costs. For more information, go to newradiomedia.com or call Buzz Van Houten at 248-939-9999.
Tarno knows doors. We've got garage doors, entry doors, storm doors, custom doors. Tarno knows doors.
Plus, the latest LiftMaster garage door openers and the toughest retractable screens on the market, all by the push of a button. Tarno Doors is celebrating its 50th year anniversary and is the recipient of the 2016 Subcontractor of the Year from the Home Builders Association.
Tarno knows doors. Tarno knows doors.
Hi, I'm Andy.
And I'm David.
Join us for fun and adventure on our new show, Podquesters, where we fight through imaginary battles and pray to the dice gods for good rolls.
Yes, it's an epic sweeping adventure where we try to fulfill our destinies without driving the Dungeon Master crazy.
I thought that was the point.
Anyways, check us out here on newradiomedia.com Fridays, Podquesters.
See you there.
Want to stay informed, entertained, and enlightened? Get connected and stay connected today to New Radio Media. The New Radio Media app is now available for download in the Apple and Google Play Store. Just search for NRM Streams for unlimited access to archived, live, new, exciting, and unique content,
Welcome to Geektainment Weekly.
all for free. Do it now. Stay connected.
We are back with my guest, Oakland County Probate Court Judge Linda Hallmark. Before the break, we were talking about conservatorships and guardianships. And let's go back, and why don't you tell our viewers exactly what it takes to be a conservator or a guardian in either an estate situation or a mental health situation.
All right. Well, that process is initiated by a petition to the court, and that can be done either if you have counsel representing you, an attorney would present the petition, or people can come in just on their own. And I should mention that Oakland County has an excellent website. So anyone who is interested in filing a petition can go to our website. You can get the forms right there that are printable. And it also has a number of frequently asked questions. It tells you a little bit about the probate process. So that's a really good resource as a beginning point if you feel that you want to file a petition. And it comes in all different kinds of ways. We get petitions from the Department of Health and Human Services. They have what they call adult protective services. So if you have a concern, perhaps your neighbor, you haven't seen them in a while, you don't think they're doing so well, you might want to call Adult Protective Services. They'll do a welfare check, and if they decide that the person needs the help of a guardian or conservator, they might file a petition. Sometimes it comes about because the person's hospitalized. There's a stroke, or there's a heart issue, or some kind of medical emergency. And then once the person is hospitalized, the hospital becomes concerned because they don't want to just release this person without having a good plan for their aftercare. So we get petitions from the hospital. And then, of course, family members will come in and ask that, there be a petition because grandma or grandpa isn't doing so well. So it can come to us in all of those different kinds of ways. But it starts with a petition. We set those for hearing. They're generally heard first on a Wednesday morning. Often they're not contested. People, you might ask grandma, do you want your grandson to be the guardian? And
makes sense.
If they agree, then we have an uncontested situation. If nobody else comes in and files any objection, we'll make that appointment. We always want to look first at the family members and people who are closest to the individual because there's a comfort level there, and it just makes sense legally to do that. If there's no one to act, as I said, we also have people who will come in, lawyers who are public guardians, and they may oversee the case for us. So it can go in any of those kinds of directions.
Judge Hallmark, do the public guardians or public conservator, do they have special training?
Generally, they're lawyers, and they generally specialize in these kinds of cases. It's really difficult to take one on unless you kind of have a little bit of knowledge about, first of all, handling people who might be legally incapacitated. It's good for those public guardians to have relationships, for instance, with the nursing homes and the assisted living facilities that are in the county, just to have a basic working knowledge so that they might know how to get someone placed. Also, issues surrounding, is it necessary to apply for Medicare or Medicaid benefits for this person, pension benefits, all those kinds of things. So it's a pretty specialized area, and there are a relatively small number of attorneys who handle those cases, but very helpful if the need arises. And it's also helpful for parties who are coming in individually to consult with a good lawyer who has that kind of background so that you're making sure, as I said, that you have plenty of assets and the appropriate care for the individual who's involved.
Now, it's important to have a good lawyer, especially in a contestant situation, but there's no legal requirement that a person have a lawyer in the probate court, is there?
No, there really isn't. And of course, many of our cases are individuals who come in without attorneys. So we have a really mixed bag. We have everything from very complex litigation with perhaps 5 or 6 lawyers and down to cases where it's just, mom and pop coming in and making a request.
Right. Let's talk about the juvenile docket.
All right.
Tell us about that.
The juvenile docket in Oakland County is handled within our circuit court. It's part of the family division. So there are different types of juvenile cases. The juvenile delinquency cases are those where a young person under age 17 commits what would be a crime if they were an adult. And although they're criminal in nature, they're really civil proceedings. So they're handled in a civil case context. And the goal in those juvenile delinquency cases is to rehabilitate rather than to punish an individual. So for instance, if a juvenile is found guilty of a larceny, a theft, or something along those lines, we work with that young person to try to rehabilitate them so they can go out and be a productive member of society. So those are really interesting cases. Again, they run the gamut from minor things to major felony type crimes. Now, you can also be charged, even as a juvenile, you can be charged as an adult, and sometimes that happens, especially if it's a more serious type crime. That's a prosecutor decision.
Why don't you take us, well, the question I have basically is, when you do an involuntary commitment, as you say, either because of mental illness, or sometimes doesn't it involve someone who may have had a drug overdose or an alcohol overdose or a reaction to some type of medications? How long are those usually for?
Again, that's statutory. A first commitment on an involuntary basis, they can be hospitalized up to 30 days and up to 60 days of outpatient treatment. If it's what I referred to before, the Kevin's Law, the assisted outpatient treatment, those are longer orders. Those are up to 180 days. And it can include a portion of time where the person is in a hospital and then outpatient thereafter. So it just sort of depends on how it's filed and what service is being requested.
Let's take our viewers through a typical day, and different things happen on different days. So Monday is what, trials or hearings, or tell us about this, Judge Holman.
Yeah, it depends on the week.
Okay.
They're all a little bit different. Our mental health docket is heard every Monday and Thursday, and the 4 probate judges rotate that. So once a month on Mondays and Thursdays, I have a mental health docket. Every Wednesday mornings, we have what we call our miscellaneous motion call. So on motion call morning, and I know, Henry, you've been on many of those are sort of anything under the sun can come at us. So we have things like, should an account be allowed? Should someone be appointed as a guardian or a conservator? Should an estate be opened? So all those kinds of cases are heard on Wednesday mornings. If any of those matters are contested, then we will set hearings, evidentiary hearings on those cases, and those can be any day of the week. So that kind of fills up the rest of the time. Just depends on what comes in, what's contested, and then we oversee our docket, based kind of on what we get Wednesday morning.
Can there be jury trials in probate court?
There can be, because there can be civil litigation as well as some of these other things I've mentioned. The mental health docket can go to jury trial. If someone requests a jury, they are entitled to that. In a decedent's estate, for instance, if there's a contested matter, the parties can request a jury trial. So there are different ways to make those requests, and we do oversee some jury trials.
Can you tell us about any cases that have stuck in your mind?
Well, I don't know about specific cases,
or maybe some issues that really come up.
The issues that stick with you probably are the more emotional issues. We do see a lot of people who are facing major issues of loss. They might have lost a spouse or a child. Those are very, very difficult and emotional for the court, of course, as well as for the parties. So those kinds of categories of cases can be really tough sometimes. But there are many rewarding cases as well. We've seen cases where, for instance, someone was legally incapacitated, especially if they're a young person, and they get to recovery. And then they'll come in and terminate a guardianship or a conservatorship because they're able to function fully again. And those are very rewarding situations. So those are the kinds of cases that kind of stick with you on the negative side and then on the very positive side.
Are you seeing more and more people as our society ages dealing with issues involving perhaps Alzheimer's or dementia?
Yeah, as people are living longer, certainly we're seeing a big increase in those kinds of cases. And also a big increase in our mental health docket. The other thing that's happening at the moment that's disturbing is the whole opioid crisis, which all of the courts are having some issues about. So with the crisis with opioids, we might see more minor guardianships where a grandparent, for instance, will have to come in and ask for guardianship of a grandchild because parents have opioid addiction. Often people with mental health issues are seeking drugs and other alternatives to psychotropic medication, and then those addictions also are, we have to deal with on top of the mental health issue. So all of that makes it way more complicated, and
how do
we're
you deal
seeing
with
many
issues
issues.
when there are the opioid or other drug issues?
Sometimes it's really hard to sort out what exactly is going on. We do have to rely on medical testimony often, and what the person's history is, and try and get them to the appropriate facility to treat whatever's going on.
Now, you're an excellent judge, and
Thank
you've
you.
done this for a while. What advice would you give as far as what you believe makes a good judge, especially in the probate or family law areas?
Yeah, I think it's a specialized area. So the first thing, I think it's very important to have the legal expertise. You really do need to know your area of law. Law has become specialized, as you well know.
Yes.
So it's very important, first of all, to have a good base of knowledge with respect to what the law is. Secondly, I would say temperament. It's not for everybody.
True.
You need to have the patience to be able to let people talk and express themselves. So a good judicial temperament is important. And then I would say compassion for the people that we're seeing, because as I said, if you're taking on family or probate issues, many people are in pretty bad distress, and you need to have a little bit of compassion for what they're going through.
Judge Hallmark, we have 1 minute left. What words of wisdom would you like to share with us for our viewers?
Well, again, I'd like to point you to our resources. Take a look at our website, because I think that's a great resource. And also, we have fine attorneys in Oakland County. Very important, if you're grappling with some of these issues, to at least consult with an attorney and have them direct you, because sometimes people just don't know how complicated their situation is. So the Oakland Bar, for instance, has great referral sources. So seek out a good lawyer and get their advice.
And I guess even if you don't hire one, at least consult.
Yes.
I'm being cued, we're out of time. So Judge Linda Hallmark, I want to thank you so much for being my guest on Gracefully Graying. And I want to thank you for watching Gracefully Graying.
What's going on in your neighborhood?
They say it takes a village.
It's the simple things.
The things that are a testament to the old.
And the things that are a testament to the new.
Know what's going on in your community.
Check out our community channel on newradiomedia.com.
Why are we here? What makes a person truly good? For those answers, you're going to have to take a philosophy class. But if you're more interested in who would win in a fight between R2-D2 and a Dalek, watch Get It to the Geeks on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. on newradiomedia.com.
This June, Fat Mike's Punk and Drublic Festival takes over Legend Valley Campground in Thornville, Ohio for 3 days of kick-ass punk rock, food, beer, and camping. Lineup includes NoFX, Rancid, Me First and the Gimme Gimmes, Pennywise, Muddy Muddy Boss Jones, and much, much more. In addition, there will be a craft beer tasting garden with over 200 craft beers, which includes local and national. Also, there will be stories from the road, including Fat Mike of NoFX, Keith Morris of Black Flag, and Jello Biafra. Tickets are on sale right now at punkandrublicfest.com. We'll see you there.
Take it over. The idiots are taking